And welcome everybody to day 3 of the California Small Farm Conference. We are so excited to have you here today. My name is Evan Wigg. I'm with Community Alliance with Family Farmers, and today we're going to be digging into creating quality jobs in agricultural businesses. We've got 3 wonderful presenters who will be with us this morning, and I just want to give a huge thank you to all of you for showing up bright and early this morning to dig into this important topic. And of course, a special thanks to our presenters for coming to share their wisdom, their experiences, and these wonderful resources. So I want to encourage everybody at home to use the chat function down at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions, comments, maybe just introduce yourselves, and interact with today's workshop. And with that, thank you so much for being here. We're looking forward to this, and I will pass it along to you all now.
Thanks, Evan, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here on such an early morning. Let me go ahead and share my screen really quickly, and then we'll get started. Okay. Like Evan said, good morning. Feel free to grab your coffee, tea, whatever you need to make yourself cozy for the next hour. We'll be here covering quality jobs in agriculture. And we'll start with some introductions so you know who is speaking today. So my name is Andrea Levy, pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Senior Program Manager at California FarmLink. I run our business education courses, the Resilerator and El Resilerador, which are an English and a Spanish business 10-week business course intensive, where we cover topics like accounting, taxes, labor, and much, much more. And today we'll mostly be focusing on the labor part. And I also manage and run our employment Resilerator, which is where the content from some of today's workshop comes from, and some of the learnings we've had come from that course that we ran for the first time this year.
Thank you, Andrea, and also Evan, and hello, everybody. I wish we could all be together in a room, seeing each other and not talking to you over Zoom waves, but I really appreciate those of you who are here to sort of think about this subject together. There'll be time for questions and so forth. And my name's Judith. I've spent more than 30 years as an owner of Full Belly Farm, where we have, every day, 6 days a week, more 100 employees coming in. So I thought a lot about whether we were good employers or what we could do to be better employers. And those are some of the things that led to me working with Andrea at California FarmLink to develop some of those ideas into a course that we've been teaching. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rebecca King. I own a 40-acre sheep dairy farm in Monterey County. Excuse me. I just finished taking the employment exhilarator with Andrea and Judith and found it really valuable. I have had employees for 16 years on my farm. I have 7 employees in contrast to Judith's 100. So it might be nice to see the comparison of a smaller farm versus a larger crew. I've also been a farm employee and intern, and that's had a big influence on how I treat and interact with my employees, is based on my experiences, good and bad, as a farm worker. So hopefully that can be helpful to some of you.
Awesome. Thanks, Judith and Rebecca. We're excited to hear from you today. I'll go ahead and get us started. I did want to mention that if you have questions that come up, we'll be covering like 3 different areas. So we'll pause in between and try to cover any questions. There is a Q&A. Please try to keep questions, I believe, in the Q&A. It might be easier for us to look at. There's also a chat. I was just going to ask Judith, if you have the availability, feel free to pause me or us. I can't see it as well as the presenter, so. But yes, we encourage questions and we want to hear from you. There's going to be time at the end for Q&A as well, but we want to be a little bit more engaged with you all. So we'll kick it off to just frame why we're here and what exactly is a quality job, and what is a quality job specifically in agriculture and in farms and ranches. So we have a bit of a framework that we work with when thinking about a quality job. We want to talk about the different aspects of employee management today, and how we can improve practice of employee management, both for the benefits of the employees and the benefits of the farm business. So here we're going to dive into what defines a quality job. A good job both meets people's basic needs and also offers conditions for growth and motivation. So you can see there's 3 different areas in this framework: economic stability, economic mobility, and equity, respect, and voice. When we think about economic stability, this is more talking about the meeting the basic needs. A good job would provide workers with confidence that they can meet their basic needs, like food, a safe place to live, support of their family, healthcare. And the ways to also support this is not just by the amount of pay, but things like reliable scheduling, safe working conditions so that they do feel safe and that their needs are being met. The second area of a good or high quality job is economic mobility. And that means that a job that provides clear pathways for and further opportunities. So accessible paid trainings, development opportunities, wealth building opportunities, ways that employees can save in the future. And then the last area is equity, respect, and voice. And this speaks to more on how an employee is valued, how they are treated, how they are seen in the business. So a good job would respect the contributions that people bring to the organization, and make sure not to discriminate on things like gender, race, ethnicity, language barriers, demographics, characteristics, and the sorts. I think a big area that we dive into here, and we'll talk a little bit more later, is the cultural piece of the business and how people, how employees are brought into the mission of the organization, and how they're valued and how those things align. So with that, a little bit more framing about what are good jobs in agriculture specifically. So let's talk about some of the research that's been done in the past. So there was a survey that was done, I believe, a few years ago by two organizations, Not Our Farm and the Fair Share Coalition. They have a big study that was published. It's called Farming into the Future by Centering Farm Workers. And this is what this study is referring to. They interviewed employees, so farm workers, on many, many different small and medium farms, and rated what factors in their jobs were important to them and what values they had. And these were the top 7 factors. And we'll dive into some of these a little bit later, but respectful treatment, effective communication, safe working conditions, clear expectations, workplace culture, equality of task assignments, regardless of gender, and wages. And I think when I look at this, what I like to note and what I like to mention is that these are 7 values employees had, and only 2 of those are more like technical or like wage related. So wages comes in at number 7, and then safe working conditions comes in at 3. But all the other ones speak more to those other 2 quadrants we were in, the DEI quadrant and the economic mobility and communication. So I think this frames what we're going to be talking about today. We're really going to be getting into how to build good work culture, because as you can see, a lot of these are related to interpersonal topics and communication. So we want to be considering these things and putting them into practice in our businesses. Oh, there we go. And then I'll just cover this really quickly. There was another study done that was more regional. It was run by UC Extension, specifically in Napa County, but they've also expanded a little bit and done a few farms outside of Napa County. But again, the UC Extension was surveying farm workers and identifying areas in their work that they were satisfied, and then areas that they were not satisfied. They were anonymous, and farm owners were given some of this feedback to be able to implement them, but they were anonymous, which is a really important part of this work. And we listed from very satisfied to extremely dissatisfied some of the results. And I think from looking at this and reading this, another area to think about is like what is in your control and what isn't. And then the areas that you feel like are in your control, those are like maybe like the lower hanging fruit. And then the areas that maybe aren't in your control, there's different ways to like address those. So when we look here, people were very satisfied with the nature of agricultural work. So that speaks to culture and values of why people do this work. They were satisfied with interactions with coworkers and supervision. They were also satisfied with communication, pay, and convenience of schedule. And then if I jump down to the dissatisfied, health consequences of agricultural work, and then distance and quality of transportation to and from work. Again, this is specifically in Napa, and I believe probably has more focused on wine and in that region. But when I think about like what is in your control, maybe the health consequences of agriculture is not in your control, or travel might not be in your control because of where you farm and where someone lives, but there are ways to get around that. And addressing those, even if you can't change them in your business, is really important. So that's like having really open communication. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Yeah, and lastly, the reason we're here today, like, why do we care? Obviously we want to treat our employees right, but how does it affect also us as farm owners? Because we know that as farm and ranch owners, you all are also like under a lot of stress, both financially, physically, time constraints. So this isn't easy to do, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of thoughtfulness and intention. But at the end of the day, the point of it is also to improve the business. It's been proven that more satisfied workers are less likely to leave the business because they feel aligned and connected. There's lower absenteeism. There's improved morale, higher productivity, and better job performance. That's super important on the farm. If people are happy, they're aligned with the mission, not only are they showing up, but they're showing up with a positive attitude, and they want to help, and they're more willing to help. And so at the end of the day, that is a higher profit for the business and also less stress on you. So that's why we want to cover this and why we want to make time to think about these factors.
Okay, well, I know for some of you, the definition that we just heard of what a quality job is might seem a little overwhelming. I think in agriculture and for many farmers, that is totally normal, totally the case, especially in California, where there are lots and lots of labor laws, economic mobility, economic stability, respect, all of those things. Many of them, though, are in the realm of possibility, and those are some of the skill building things that we had talked about in our course. But I first just wanted to tell you that as having spent all this time as an employer, always, people would come to the farm and say, "Oh, you seems like you're doing a good job. You have these employees that have stayed with you for decades, and various things." And I always felt like, wow, we really could be doing better. We really should be doing better. What can we do better? And that sort of made me want to do this course, as I said earlier. But another thing that I think is important is that if you read the farm press and the journalists and so forth, you'll see a certain description of farm labor and farm workers that is kind of across the board, a little bit like this first paragraph. I'm sorry, I'm going to read it out loud. Farm workers are among the poorest workers in the US. Hazardous conditions are routine and include pesticide exposure, heat stress, lack of shade, and adequate clean drinking water. So that's definitely what it's like on some farms. But what I realized is that there's a whole spectrum of employers, and there's a really large group of farmers that aren't getting enough attention. And those are the ones like some of these really inspiring farmers that were in our course. And the second quote is one from a student in our course who said, "Managing employees is something that I never really thought I wanted to do, but it became necessary for our farm to grow to a profitable scale. And while there are many aspects of employee management that I do enjoy, there are still many aspects that I'm unsure about, and I always want to do better." So I think that that's also one of the kinds of employees and the kinds of farms that should be getting more attention and should be more understood as an important part of agriculture. So next slide. One of the things that folks in California probably already know if they're farming is that labor is one of the biggest expenses on the farm. And this graph, you don't have to look at it carefully because it just breaks it down by crop, makes the point that, and this graph is for the US as a whole, not just for California, where we mostly grow that specialty crop category. That's the one that shows the biggest line, which means the biggest percent of your expenses are in labor. So that's one reason, sort of a practical reason, that California farmers growing any of these high value crops that require a lot of labor would probably want to be paying a lot of attention to how to be the best employer that they can. And next slide. And so again, when we talked about quality jobs in California and all of the elements that are important, the things that farm workers say are important to them, if you look at California's labor laws, it turns out that we have some very strong labor laws, and that's really actually kind of good for us as farmers, because it means that compliance, if we learn those laws and we figure out how to be in compliance, we're actually going to be doing really well. So the press might tell us, well, compliance is sort of a low bar. But in fact, if you really get into it and really become compliant with labor laws, you've made a huge step as a small business, where there's so many things to be taken care of. So following labor laws in California, things like minimum wage, paid leave, safety regulations, social justice, equity, those things are part of what we focus on in when we think about quality jobs. But also, next slide, we think, oh, I think, you know what, Andrea, I think you're going to talk on this one.
Yeah, did you want to finish a thought, or are you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about the compliance, but it's also about the culture of your approach to your employees. Yeah.
Thanks, Judith. On responding to that last statement, I always like to think about this work as I like to say it's soft skills and it's hard skills. There's the technical aspect of following compliant regulations and being compliant. And then there's the soft skills, which sometimes can be harder to grapple with. And so on this right side of this slide, you can see that we have about 8 or 10 areas where we like to focus when we talk about becoming a good employer or becoming a great employer. Creating a safe workplace, a respectful workplace, thinking about training programs, thinking about conflict resolution. If you're working with people, conflict will come up, solving problems, and within solving problems, talking about delegation. How do you delegate? Why do you delegate? Recruiting and onboarding, such a big one in agriculture. Audits and inspection, again, that goes back to more maybe like a technical regulatory piece. Compensation, also such a big one that comes up. And then employee benefits. So those are about like 9 areas that we could focus on. Today, we're really only going to focus on 2 of those. We're going to talk about creating a safe workplace. So that talks a little bit more about safety trainings, and some plans for that. And then we're going to talk about creating a positive work culture, which speaks a little bit more to those like interpersonal skills or just communicating about the values in your business. So yeah, and like Judith said, we know this isn't easy and we know this takes a lot. And you can, take it little by little. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect at all of these, and it takes time to implement all of these practices. And actually, I'm sure a lot of you on here are already implementing some of these. So with that, we're going to dive into creating a safe workplace first. So we'll talk about safety.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to sort of emphasize again, this is kind of a bird's eye view of this subject. It's taking it from a perspective of a big, broad perspective. We're going to sort of go over this idea of creating this program, how to create a safe workplace. And we're not going to go into a lot of the details that you would need to go into, but because we want to leave a little time for discussion and questions and so forth. But let me just remind you how this feeling safe in not having health impacts from going to work just simply because it's agricultural work. This was one of the things that was mentioned in both of those 2 surveys that Andrea covered. they both said that the farm workers cared about having a workplace that was safe and that wasn't going to impact their health negatively. So it's highly valued, one of the things that's highly valued by the workers. And there's a lot that goes into having a good safety program, but it's not always about, just training people to drive the forklift properly or training them what the standard operating procedure is for everything that they're doing. Again, there's always going to be a cultural element. And so you do have to have regular safety trainings, but you also want to have really good communication so that people will tell you if they think that there's an issue in terms of safety. You want to create a workplace culture where everyone knows that you value their safety, that you feel like their safety is part of the success of your business. And it's not just you, but all of the crew feels that they want to help make the workplace safety. And then it's going to be, there's open communication. If they see something that they don't think is safe, they're not going to get in trouble for telling you or the owner or the manager about that thing. So you get everybody involved. It's a culture of safety. So yeah, next slide. So California has a rule that everybody needs to have an illness and injury prevention plan, but in agriculture, it's especially important for you to have one. So, and it has to be a written plan. It has to have certain elements. Next slide. And this sort of gets to the compliance part of it. We think that it is really great for you to have a safety plan. And California's OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also thinks so. And they say that there are 8 steps, and this is what they are. And so if you were creating a safety program, you would go through and sort of take each of these steps in turn to create a program for your farm and kind of write down the high points of each point. You'd have a person that was in charge of the program. You'd think about systems to make sure that people actually knew about it and were doing what you wanted or what you thought was the most safe. You'd have open communication. You'd have an assessment go through the farm, go through your business and say, okay, where are the hazards and how can we address them? If there are injuries or near injuries, any accidents, you're going to find out why they happened and correct the hazards. You're going to have regular trainings, and something that's always hard for us at our farm, you're going to document everything, your whole program and all of your activities. Next slide. So just sort of one element of what we just discussed. We could go through all of those steps. We're not going to really go through all of those steps, but just one element of that is that you do, even though you can't just sort of talk about your safety procedures, you want to have it written so that you're training everyone who needs to know about potentially hazardous activities. You're going to use that written document to help you train everyone equally. And that written document also will be helpful if there were an accident and you were inspected, or if there was a question about whether you had a shade, a heat program, you could document, yep, we do, here it is, this is what we do. And you obviously have to be reviewing and troubleshooting and maybe even doing additional trainings if you find that something's not working in your safety procedures. Next slide. And then, back to this idea about communication. You want to know about any hazards that your employees can identify on the farm, and you want to encourage people to report on anything that they've seen. And if there's any acts, if someone feels like they fell down and they hurt their back, you don't want to say, well, go, we don't want to hear about it. You want to make sure that it's reported, that you document it. And even if there was something that actually didn't result in an accident, but was a near miss, it's kind of great to know about that, because then you can correct the problem before there actually is an accident. But the main take home here is that there's a safety culture at work, and people are comfortable talking about the issues with you, and they all feel like it's equal. There's responsibility across the board to make sure that the safety program is successful. Yeah, so here again, this is just one of the steps, and to get a flavor of how you might go about this. You would, if you were just starting with your safety program, or if you were just renewing it and reviewing it, you would look around your farm and sort of see where you would identify a potential hazard. Like ladders is a good example. Forklifts is a good example. Lifting things repeatedly over and over again in a certain position. All those are things that could potentially cause a back injury or a chronic injury, or with the ladders, that's one of the higher areas where there are a lot of injuries in agriculture. So you would just assess it. And also, if you bring in a new piece of equipment or do change your process, that's another time to assess if that change has created any new hazards. And again, if you find out that there was a near accident, that would be a good moment for you to assess any hazards. And if an employee goes from, working in the orchard to working in the packing shed, you might need to, talk to them about slipping on the wet floor, or not parking the forklift in the wrong place so that people trip over the tines, things like that. So if you reassign people, there's sometimes a need to give them additional training. And yeah, speaking of training is not just part of a safety program. It's a part of the whole farm culture of communication. You want to get everyone on the same page. You want people to know what really the values of the farm are, and what the standard operating procedures are, and so forth. So but that said, it's really a critical element of any kind of good safety program. And here on the right, we sort of give you some of the examples, some of the building blocks of a positive work culture, and training is definitely one of the ones that we think is high up there in terms of creating a positive work culture. Next slide. So again, you in terms of safety training, you would want to have certain moments where you knew that you had to do a safety training. You want to have a review of your safety program at least annually. You talk about for example, you talk about heat right before it starts getting hot. You talk about water, and where to fill up your bottles, and all of those kinds of things. So you want to review the whole safety program with your employees at least annually. You want to you want to have specific trainings for anyone that's working on or operating equipment that could be hazardous, like driving a forklift or spraying pesticides. Of course, with new employees, you want to explain training. You want to explain to them how they are going to be working, who they're going to be working with, what the procedures are going to be, what happens if they don't comply with the procedures, those kinds of things. So there's sort of opportunities for training that happen throughout the year. And again, this was just a bird's eye. That's the end of our little session on training, and excuse me, our session on safety. And it's really just a bird's eye view. It's really just to give you a sense of how to get started. There's resources available online from OSHA, California Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and also from many other organizations that can give you, training guides and all kinds of things that will help you create a training program on your farm. So I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca so that we can actually hear from someone on the ground.
And before we do that, I did want to add, Rebecca, if you have anything to add to that section, feel free. We have one question on the safety and accidents, and maybe we'll dive into that question really quick and then talk about positive work culture. So the question is from Muriel. Pressure to work, and it's a comment question. The pressure to work fast seems like a typical cause for accidents, but also there's a need for productivity. So I think there's some things to dive into there.
I think it's great, and everyone should get a chance to talk about this, but I'll just dive right in. That it's kind of like what we've learned is that yes, there's always pressure to go fast, to move efficiently, and to be as productive as possible. But if there's an accident, or if people feel too pressured, or if people are hot and stressed and tired and unappreciated, that is not going to create a productive, efficient situation. So what it turns out is that even though the mindset is, we really need to push, we really need to get this done, we really need to pick those beats faster, in fact, it may be that that's counterproductive, and that you need to make people to hear people. You need to hear that they need to take their 10-minute breaks at the intervals that are legally required, and they need to get water and rest at a regular schedule, and that ends up, in fact, creating a more efficient crew that works really well together and knows that they're appreciated. But anyone else who wants to dive into that question, go ahead. Turn it over to Rebecca, maybe.
All right. Yeah, I think that was a great response. I found that sometimes when we're trying to do too much is when we make mistakes. That sometimes, I've had to say, okay, let's not try and do 3 things at once. Let's cut back and try and do the 2 things correctly, take a break, and then do the 3rd thing, instead of trying to do it too much too fast. Okay, so Judith and Andrea asked me to talk about creating a positive workplace culture. So if you want to switch to the next slide. So share the big picture with your crew. I think this is a great place to start. It can start when you're interviewing someone for a job. Like, tell them your story. Why did you start your farm? What is it that you find important? Did you start your farm because you're a foodie and you really like high quality products and you want to sell to restaurants and, that angle? Or, I have livestock and I, part of why I started my farm is wanting to have animal products that are raised ethically. And so treating animals very respectfully is important to, why I have a farm. And feeding your community through farmers markets and direct relationships with your customers, all of those different issues may be really important to you. So it's important to let your crew understand that and be part of that. And that also helps employees to feel that they are part of that bigger picture too, when they understand the story of the farm and your story. So next, so share your business vision. So this, when you're first starting out, maybe you're trying to, get an idea of what your farm is, but even established farmers, it's important to keep thinking about that. This shows, Instagram posts and things. One thing this slide brought to mind to me as a caution is be honest. Don't fall into the trap of just trying to make everything look perfect and shiny and, oh, what a great farmer I am. Maybe there's some negative things that happen on a farm, and it's okay to share those things too. I've had the experience of, reading someone's CSA newsletter, and it always makes it seem so rosy and positive, but people want to know what's going on in your farm. If you're maybe had a peas that failed, and that was a problem, but they also want to know about your employees and their stories too. If your employees are open to it, maybe they could, you could have one of your employees write one of the newsletters one month and tell what their experience is, or have them in the pictures. Try and have them be a representative of your farm and feel some ownership in that way. I have events on my farm. We do an open house a couple times a year, and I like to have, partly I need all my employees on hand for help, but I also like to have employees give tours, or maybe be in the pen with the baby lambs and interact with the customers and talk about how we raise baby lambs and all the work goes into that. And I think telling someone else about what you do makes you appreciate it more. I find that satisfying, that if I have people come and I give them a tour around the farm, and you kind of step back and see the forest for the trees, that I think that is good for employees to feel that same bigger picture as well. So the next slide. So be intentional about positive work culture. I think the first most important thing is lead by example. Treat your employees how you want to be treated. When you have a new employee, find out about who they are. What is their motivation? Why do they want to come work on a farm? We know it's probably not to get rich. So what are the things that they're looking for? Do they want to learn new skills? Do they have skills already that you can take advantage of? What are their challenges? It's also good to know what some people just aren't going to ever be skilled at a certain task. So it's probably better to find another way to use their positive skills. How do they learn? I found some people really learn best by example and you walking them through something. Some people really want to jump in on their own. Some people are verbal. I found I have some employees, I have to write things down. If I tell them verbally, it doesn't always get through. So it's best to, try and communicate multiple ways. You may feel like you're saying the same things over and over again, but maybe it just takes a few different ways of communicating for it to get through to different people. And then sometimes you have employees who are quiet naturally and shy, and so you can't necessarily expect them to come forward with an issue or problem, because that's not in their nature. So you need to maybe check in with that person a little more often. But all your employees, you should be making them feel comfortable telling you if they don't understand something, or if a problem came up and they aren't sure how to proceed, that they don't fear either that you're gonna be upset with them or frustrated that they have questions. You need to make them feel that you're glad that they're asking you questions and want further clarification. And then make your employees feel seen and valued and part of your family. Like this picture here, they're taking a popsicle break. It can be simple things like that. You had a big day, maybe you planted all the tomatoes for the season and it was 100 degrees out, and it was kind of a thing. So you take a half an hour and buy everybody popsicles and just kind of say, hey, good job, thank you. We do, in the summertime, we do a little pizza potluck once a month, and I invite all my employees and some of the friends and other farms nearby. And it doesn't have to be anything big, but just saying, hey, you're someone I want to hang out with and get to know better, and you're all welcome and part of our farm family. And then recognize when someone has done an extra good job and you appreciate them. I know I find a lot of the time I'm giving corrections and directions, and I have to consciously stop and acknowledge when someone's done a really good job. You know, once in a while I'll get an email that one of my farmers market employees is really great. So I try and make a point of forwarding that to them or telling them that. But it can also be, you know, I had a couple of employees that had been with me for a really long time, and we went out to dinner at one of the restaurants that buys our products. And for them, that was a really great thing. They really, you know, were excited about going to a fine dining restaurant. Not all my employees would appreciate that. I have another employee that he was having a party, so I gave him a lamb to barbecue. And for him, that was a big recognition. But also, you know, you want to encourage your employees as a group to feel like they're, you know, they're friends with each other, but also, you know, they're supporting each other, that they wouldn't want to, you know, not show up to work because that means their fellow employees are going to be let down. And then another part of that is giving your employees opportunities for learning new skills, for education. You know, my labor force is it's the most expensive part of my budget is labor. So I'd love to pay everybody twice as much as I do, but I can't. But I can give them opportunities that have value, like sending them to workshops or classes. I've sent people to cheese making workshops. So I sent my farm manager to a shearing school in Texas because we couldn't find a shearer in the area. And so now that's a skill he has, and he's taught a couple of the other employees. And depending on the person, you know, maybe they, after working 6 months or a year doing one job on the farm, they might want to try doing a different job on the farm just to have something new and to get new responsibilities. Delegation, you know, someone who's been working for you for a long time and you trust and does a good job, maybe it's time to have them be training new people or be taking responsibility for something that you were doing. And, you know, now they're stepping up and responsibility. Hard jobs on the farm, that's something that I, as a farm employee, I have been influenced that I don't want to ask anyone to do a really bad job that I myself wouldn't do or haven't done. You know, like cleaning out the grease trap in the dairy, or castrating baby pigs, or something that's just, nobody really wants to do that. You need to, you know, recognize that those are unpleasant jobs and that you appreciate that that person doing that job, you know, that's not something they maybe want to do. So you need to be respectful of that and let people know that you understand. Yeah, we probably don't want to spend our day doing the worst jobs, but they have to be done and there's a reason. But sometimes you can, some of those jobs you can buy some kind of equipment or redesign your system so you're avoiding some of those jobs, like cleaning out a chicken coop that's full of nasty manure. When we got chickens here, we designed houses that were much easier to clean, that had a little door on the grounds that the tractor could get the manure out. So I didn't have to have anyone using a wheelbarrow scooping manure. One more thing on this slide is fairness across job types. That, you know, a lot of farms, we have the farm workers who were on the grounds in the field, and then maybe you have your farmers market employees, and often there's you know, ethnic division there. You know, you have people who are only Spanish speaking that are working on the farm because they can't, you know, be doing the sales. And it's important to make sure that you're recognizing that even if these are different groups of employees, they're still being treated equitably and fairly and compensated at a fair, across the board level. You could even do things like, maybe have one of your farmers market workers come and spend the day in the field and see what the field workers are doing and get a better understanding of that. Or, have one of your farm workers come to the farmers market and see what that's like. Okay, next slide. So this is getting into harassment and discrimination and just undesirable behaviors. And I think this goes back to having a positive work environment to begin with, and having good communication and trust among your employees. I think all of those things are preventative measures that, if your employees feel trusted and valued and that you listen to them, that they're more likely to come to you before big problems happen, and you can deal with it. And leading by example. If you are treating people respectfully and not allowing inappropriate comments or behavior, it can go a long way to keeping problems from developing. But you're still, that doesn't mean that there won't be situations that arise. So it's important to have that groundwork of communication and trust. So then when the situations come up, you already have avenues for dealing with them. And you want to, make people feel recognized that, if they're uncomfortable, that you are doing something about it. Next slide. Diversity in the workplace, recognizing employees' differences. I think, in some ways that can go back to that, on the farm, to out in the marketplace division that can happen. That maybe, that's could be, cultural differences on your farm between different employees. And that's why I think it's important to, have social situations where all your employees are interacting, or maybe, having people who don't have anything in common work together to get to kind of appreciate each other. But there's always, you need to set that groundwork in the beginning of, hey, everyone here is valued, everyone here is respected. One group of people is not more valuable than the other, that we're all part of the same family, same farm. Next slide. Okay, so here's a good, framework for how to, consciously make some of these aspects of your farm, be organized. I think this is really important. When you have a new employee, training is super important. Being clear in what your expectations are, clear in what their job is. You can let them know, yeah, I want to give you learning opportunities, let me know if you want to try something else, but also let them know that there's going to be some jobs that are boring or hard or not super pleasant, and that's part of it too. I don't want you to be spending all your time doing something you find miserable. We'll try and mix it up and have, some things that are more interesting to you, but you're not here just for fun, or it is a job. But if you're clear on that and, here's what's expected of you, I think that people appreciate that people are willing to do hard jobs if they know that they're seen and recognized for, doing something that isn't so great. And having regular schedules. Okay, active listening, welcoming new ideas. I've found sometimes I have a new employee and they say, well, why do I have to do it this way? Why don't we do it that way? And sometimes I just want to say, well, just trust me. This is how it this is the best way to do it. But I realized that they're thinking about, you know, their job and different ways to do things. So I don't want to shut that down. Maybe I'll, you know, take the time to explain, oh, I've tried it that way and this happens, or I've tried it this way and this is why we do things how we do them. Physical safety trainings, conflict management, clear policy for misconduct, all those things are really great preventative things. And often when you're starting out with new employees, you're overwhelmed and don't have the time for all that. So it's good to make a conscious effort to set these kind of trainings and standards in place, you know, from the beginning. Fair and inclusive decision-making, transparency, employee feedback. Yeah, don't be willy-nilly. Try and make sure that when situations come up with different employees, that you're, you know, treating them the same, even if, you know, they may be different people. You know, you got to say, well, that person didn't show up for work 3 days this month. I have to treat them the same as the other person who had the same situation. Productive praise for high performers, check-ins, clear targets, monitor achievements. Yeah, people like to know how they're doing. If someone's not, you know, performing how you want them, you need to tell them what the issue is and how they can correct it. You know, you can't just, you know, punish someone without letting them know, or without giving them the opportunity to improve. Most people want to do a good job. They want to know how to be better. And then you need to acknowledge when they do a good job. And, you know, for every time you criticize someone, try and find a positive thing to focus on to give them motivation. I think that's the last slide in this subject. Yes.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. I want to encourage anybody to add a question in the chat or comments, a question in the Q&A or comments in the chat. I think I will, you know, I will start with one comment question someone brought up, but yeah, thank you for that. And like Judith said, this is an hour where we get to dive into a little bit and have a bird's eye view. There's so much here. There's a lot of practices to put in place. The safety plan does take time. The illness and injury prevention takes time. So just knowing that, yeah, this is a learning curve for our business owners as well. There's resources out there, and also, like you heard us all mention, we do have a program around this. So if you're interested in our programs, you can go to our website, and we have a couple of programs for farmers and ranchers. So the first question or comments, and I think Rebecca did a good job at addressing this without realizing, but we'll let our panel talk a little bit to this, was someone said, as a beginning farmer, I may not always know the best way to proceed. How do I deal with changing styles or procedures when what you learn that what you're doing no longer works? I asked for some clarification on that. And this farmer spoke to being nervous about not being educated about their own farm. But I think, and Rebecca, Judith, if you want to add to this, but I think Rebecca was speaking a little bit to this of like explaining why something has been done in a certain way, but then also actively listening and noting that maybe this person is coming with a new idea that might be improve your business, and acknowledging that there are times that those things are going to change. And I think communication comes into play here a lot, of this thing changed for this reason, and this is how we're all going to learn together. I don't think that's a failure on your end. If anything, that's a success that you're willing to change and adapt.
Thanks, Andrea. And I can just add a little bit. I think that those questions get really well to what I felt like when I was first starting to farm, was that, it just seemed really challenging to me. There were, weather, equipment breakdowns, employees not coming to work when they were supposed to, people getting sick. And it was like you just really couldn't take anything hardly for granted, because it seemed like there were just always, everywhere you turned, new decisions to make and new problems to solve. And developing systems can sound pretty straightforward, but actually in the moment it can be quite difficult and frustrating and challenging. So I think these questions about learning and jobs changing and not being right at the very beginning it's like a totally normal thing to be feeling when you're trying to manage so many different elements of a small business. So I think you just have to realize that's a part of it and be as creative as you can in developing the leadership to manage all of those different strands. And also getting back to that slide at the very beginning about what are quality jobs, you just can't do it all at once. You do it step by step. You move forward every year, step by step, to get better and better.
I totally agree with Judith. I mean, the first couple of years we were building buildings and infrastructures, getting my dairy set up, and I had employees that had come as, friends of friends and weren't even interested in ag, and suddenly they were farm employees, and trying to figure out our whole system of, well, how do you milk a sheep? And your employees can be an asset in that too. You can present to them that, hey, I've never done this before either. Help me figure out what's the best way to do this. Do you have other ideas about how we could do this more efficiently? Or, let's talk about it together. Don't feel like you have to know all the answers. That's certainly not necessarily going to be the case. So, be open to your employees having input, because you might get something really valuable from that. But, you also are the ultimate decision maker. So, take their input. And if you decide to do something differently, that's fine. But you should explain, maybe why you decided you were going to do things a little bit different than, their idea.
Yeah, I think also someone added a little bit of a comment to this, which says, for problem solving, the first solution you think of is not always the most optimal. Getting more input and taking time to think it over usually is better for problem solving. So yeah, not an area of weakness. Thanks, you all. That's great add-ons. Someone also asked a more specific technical question. I don't know if you all have experience with this. Have you worked with any programs that provide upskilling for your workforce, such as ETP and YIOA? I actually don't know what those are. If you do, how is your experience? Have either of you heard of those?
I'm not familiar with
I
those.
haven't had any experience. We definitely send, we sent several of our employees to the EcoFarm conference, for example, and we actually have someone who's focusing on HR and send her annually to a conference, an HR conference. Things like that I think are really valuable. Mechanics, training in mechanics, if you have a lot of equipment. So we've experienced just specific, training areas more than any of the more general ones that are described here.
Yeah, me too. I've focused on, either cheese centric workshops or sheep and livestock trainings.
Yeah, and I think I was going to add to that, it depends on how big or small your crew is, but if you do have a medium-sized crew, the option to bring someone on farm to do trainings is also one that, instead of sending a bunch of people to a conference or a training, you can bring someone to do specific types of trainings or workshops or events to address any of these things.
Yeah, a lot of the RCDs, the Resource Conservation Districts, and NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, will come out to your farm and do like irrigation efficiency trainings, or they might have a local one that you could send your crew to for similar on-farm technical skills like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there are places that for free will come and do health safety program training. So yeah, there's UC Davis has a program, and even Cal OSHA has videos and things and programs to do training on farms. So I think there are resources out there.
Yeah, or like another simple idea is, it's a little not on farm, but a conference like this, easy for someone to attend for a day or for half a day if they're interested in different types of educational experiences. So,
and there's a lot of organizations and websites that have webinars they've had in the past, like on their websites. Maybe you could offer an employee that you would pay them their wages for the hour or two that they watched a webinar or something as an incentive. And I think that reinforces that you don't have to be the sole source of knowledge on your farm, that it's good to go outside for other educational opportunities for your employees, and they can bring back stuff to teach you, which is really a super helpful aspect, to have someone else who's got a different education that they can be contributing.
Great. Well, we have about 5 more minutes, give or take. It looks like there's another question. And I just wanted to encourage folks in the next 5 minutes, we can wrap up if we have anything to add, but we're curious to hear from you if you have been managing employees, maybe also curious to hear what has worked for you and what hasn't. What have you learned that you would share with other farm business owners? Because I think a big part of what we've picked up on is that hearing from other businesses and what they're doing can generate some ideas. Someone asked about recruitment. I think I'll just note this is a big topic that often comes up. We didn't cover it today because we just didn't have time to cover everything, but we can talk a little bit about what we've heard in terms of recruitment. The question was, how do you attract employees to come work on your farms? And there's many different ways to answer that. Rebecca,
right, it's a problem for a lot of farmers in California. There's a labor shortage. There's fewer and fewer people that are coming from Mexico, not just because it's difficult, but because they do have other opportunities. Many of the larger farms are turning to farm labor contractors and H-2A workers. So this is across the board an issue for California agriculture. And we could give you just the really pat answer: be a great employer and get your reputation out there as someone who takes care of your employees, because that word will travel, especially in communities where where people live in rural areas. They're used to farm work and they want to do farm work. They like farm work. It turns out that actually a lot of the people that work on farms say, as we saw at the very beginning of this talk, this panel, people who are asked, if you ask farm workers, are they satisfied with the nature of agricultural work? That's like one of their the highest ranking questions. Yes, we are satisfied. There are people who want to work in agriculture. So if you create a positive environment for people to work at your farm, it's more likely that you're going to be able to recruit. But we don't have any, I'm sure there's lots of specific examples that people can give about recruitment, things like, talking to your neighboring farms, seeing if the high school has students that it's legal for them to come and work at your farm during the summer. Having an internship program is something is very much worth exploring. But we don't have, there's no real easy answers to that question. I don't know if Rebecca has something to add to that.
No, it's hard. I mean, I've got 7 employees. I have a few that have worked for me for like 10 and 12 years, and the rest, between like 2 and 5. But I seem to have one position that I'm constantly trying to fill. I'll have someone come and work for a few months or 6 months, and then often it's nothing to do with the job. It's their personal life. Something comes and goes. And so, I'm always dealing with that. I found one thing that helps a lot is on-farm housing, which just not everybody's going to be able to provide that. But on my property, there's a couple houses, and one has like a granny unit. And that's been really helpful because the cost of living around here is so expensive, and I can only pay so much. But having affordable housing where they work has been a huge incentive, or kept people around, and just making it a nice place to be. Having a farm that people just would want to come and hang out if you're someplace pretty and you like the people, and you feel like the work you're doing is valuable.
Yeah, and I'll add a comment that I've heard in different ways. And Judith spoke a little bit to this about talking to farmers around you. But some of the challenge with farm work is that it's seasonal. And some farm workers want work year round. So some of the solutions we've heard is having relationships with farmers in your region. And so when you have work, you have that crew, or you have a couple of people from that crew. And then in other times where you have less work, they can go to another farm that might be producing. I know that could be hard to find, because if you're in the same region, you're probably producing similar times of year. But yeah, just kind of thinking about innovative ways to have more year-round work might help people be attracted to like your farm and some other farms in the region, because like Rebecca said, housing is a big issue for farmers and farm workers. Yeah. Okay, well, on that note, we have about 3 minutes. I don't see any more questions. Judith and Rebecca, is there anything you want to add to wrap up?
Thank you all for being with us this morning. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all. This was great. And like we mentioned, we know it's not always easy, and you're here and you're thinking about it, which already shows that you're trying to improve, and talk to your farmers or ranchers that because people are experiencing similar challenges and solutions. Bye, everybody. Have a good morning and day.
All right. Yeah. Bye-bye.